everybody, welcome back to Oscar Buzz. Trevor here, joined by Thomas as always, and we are talking about one of the most anticipated films of the year. We are talking about Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon, and we feel a little bit differently about it. We feel a little bit differently. If I mean, you know what this is, right? It's Scorsese. It's like one of his biggest projects. It's 3.5 hours long, and we have Leonardo DiCaprio, we got Lily Gladstone, and Robert De Niro, all excellent. Jesse Plemons, I think, was like kind of undersold. I think he's actually like pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of great performances.
Performance is great all around.
Here and there, but yeah.
I think the one thing that we agree on is like Lily Gladstone might be the performance of the year.
I mean, she's potentially my favorite lead actress of the year. She is incredible, and she does genuinely steal every scene she's in.
Yeah.
But the fact is also Robert De Niro steals every scene he's in.
Yeah.
So, and Leonardo DiCaprio is also giving a very interesting, very excellent performance. So all the performances all around are all incredible, all some of the best of the year, if not the best of the year. In some
Lily
regards.
in particular for me though, that's one of my favorite performances. Of this decade.
It's subtle, it's understated, but it still packs such a power.
So powerful.
And use reverence whenever she's on screen. But then Robert De Niro with his again, it's subtle. It's a subtle performance, but the way he slowly
reveals himself.
Your brain, exactly. It's really haunting, and all of the performances, all around, some of the best of the year.
Yeah,
obviously.
Also, want to shout out Cara Jade Myers, who played Anna, also excellent. We're gonna talk about her later. I think that she should be in some awards conversations. But let's get into it. So it is just a monumental film. I went into this. I am not the biggest Martin Scorsese fan, admittedly. I just none of his films have ever really I don't know, clicked with me where I'm like, I love this. And things like The Wolf of Wall Street, The Departed, I think they're not that great. They aren't entirely for me. I like some of his stuff, like Taxi Driver. I think is good. I like Silence quite a bit. There's some of his stuff that works, but this absolutely blew me away. And it's kind of similar. I don't think that we should be comparing this to Oppenheimer as a whole, but I'm going to compare it to me for me personally, in that it's directors who I'm not the biggest fan of, who come and just absolutely blow me away with what I think is the best film of their career.
Yeah, I mean, I come into this as someone who is a fan of a lot of Scorsese's work. I mean, Goodfellas, The Departed, Wolf of Wall Street are all among some of my favourite films of all time. And this is a very, very solid outing. I don't think it's necessarily among his upper echelon of films, but it is definitely, he's still got it.
He's Scorsese. He's still got it.
There is still, I had maybe some problems with it that are quite fundamental with the film. But there is so much to rave about and so much to just talk about that I don't want to come at it from a sort of negative angle. I'll just preface by saying there is so much about this film I genuinely.
We both like this a lot. I just think I like it more.
Exactly.
Which I wasn't expecting going into this, that I would be coming out of this.
Potentially not. But visuals-wise, it's insane. The cinematography in some scenes, some sequences are just so well shot. Between this and Barbie, they're at the incredible.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's also not just that; it's also the soundscape as well, the score that he uses. I mean, the soundtrack, Martin Scorsese, in all Martin Scorsese films, they're always a very key aspect of the film, and I think this is no different here. Even if it's maybe not as noticeable as in other films when he's been using songs,
incredible.
But it's still there, and it still is able to capture theme and capture the emotion and tone that you're looking for here. So
I was thinking, Thelma Schoonmaker, her edit of the film is kind of, it isn't as aggressive, but it has a really nice pace to it, honestly. I didn't feel the runtime that much. I knew you said you felt it a little bit more, but for 3.5 hours, it really didn't feel 3.5 hours.
I mean, yeah, you could definitely shave on. I think it definitely feels at least half an hour less than actually, at least maybe even an hour less. It doesn't necessarily. It feels like a long film. I think
it doesn't feel like it drags at all.
It doesn't feel like it drags. No. So whilst I don't think that the runtime was really a problem, I think he was. I almost wish that it could have been a bit longer.
I also wish it was longer.
Yes, more major criticisms with the film, because I think there was more to show. There was it's a very expansive story, but I wanted to see kind of a bit more of it potentially. But yeah, I don't think the runtime is a problem. It feels long, but it doesn't feel like 3.5 hours at all.
No.
So which is nice. It does breeze by.
I want to start out just by talking about Lily Gladstone because if you follow me on Twitter, uh, I've like my entire Twitter feed almost has just been Lily Gladstone. Um, just exceptional work. I've been a fan of her since like her Reichardt days. Like Certain Women was the film that I I was 11 when Certain Women came out. I didn't watch it like when it came out, but that was the first film when I saw it like 4 years ago. I think probably at this point that like really I was like oh Lily Gladstone, okay. And like to see where she's at now, I just exceptional work. The amount of emotional weight that she can convey with just a glance or a look or a little twitch of the face is astonishingly like impressive. I have never like anytime she appeared during the third act, I cried. Like just her showing up and just how there's a confrontation between her and Leonardo DiCaprio. I think it might be their last confrontation in the film.
I think it is.
And
Yes, I know
she's
the one you
just
mean.
she's asking a question and just the pain in her voice and just how reserved she is with her performance and just how real it feels is like soul shattering. And I've never had this experience where I saw a picture of her out of character, just regular Lily Gladstone on Twitter the day after I saw the film, and I started crying just like seeing her, just like thinking about her work in this film. I know that sounds like over dramatic and whatever, but like that her work is just exceptional in this.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the realism and sort of like that gritty feeling comes from the subtlety in not just her
Yeah.
performance, but in just in the entire film in general. You know, it's not a crime epic drama in the same way as Goodfellas or The
No,
Departed.
Scorsese only makes crime movies. Obviously, he just makes a
Exactly,
bunch of
exactly.
crime
But
movies. That's
it's
the only
not.
genre he does.
Yeah, but it is actively playing on that, which I think is like he's using the skills he's
Yeah,
developed there to, but fitting with this time period and fitting with this story that really doesn't work or doesn't really function in that same way. It doesn't really function as a crime drama of opposing sides because it's really not. It's really one side
yeah,
is actively just
doing the crime.
it's doing the crime and you've got what so but yeah, I think Scorsese, what I was really impressed by is his use of those skills that he's clearly developed with a lifelong career of doing that kind of stuff and
Yeah.
doing that kind of film, and sort of subverted it to create something new with that, and it is in this subtlety, this sort of bringing that crime drama down to earth that really makes this film work in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think really what we need to talk about, we're going to talk about spoilers, I think, a little bit. I mean, obviously, history spoilers, but there is a pretty interesting moment at the end, which really framed how I thought about this film. And I think a lot of where we disagree on this film. I mean, if you want to go ahead and lay out some of your problems with it, you
Yeah,
can
so
go
my
ahead.
major problems are that I don't know if having a film like this with the perspective of both Lily Gladstone's Molly and Leonardo DiCaprio's character, their perspectives I think are too contrasting, and don't really work in the same film. I think there are two films at play here, and I think Scorsese does his best to make it work. I do still think this is a film overall, and I can't, clarify this enough. I do think the film overall
Sure.
works. I just think it's held back from being sort of that next level, from being great, because of the fact that there are two films at play and two very contrasting films at play that don't really marry together and can't really marry together at the fundamental, which we'll get into what those two films are, but if you want to lay out your
Yeah,
reasons why, yeah.
I think we disagree about a bit like what this film is trying to do, and also what we're wanting from this film. So, we talk a lot, both off camera and on camera, about like how I think we approach films in very different ways, both as, I mean, it feels weird to call us critics, but like as moviegoers, I guess, and also as filmmakers, because we're both we collaborate together, we work together on films, we each make films, and that's eventually where we want to go in our lives. And I think our discrepancy and I guess our disagreements about how films should work really aids us when we are making stuff creatively together. But I think when it comes to talking about films, I think it provides a very different lens. That's, I think, complementary. But
Yeah.
I think that your approach is far more like storytelling and screenplay more oriented,
Yeah.
whereas I am perfectly fine if screenplay is sacrificed for
Yeah.
themes.
I
And
derive most of my emotional resonance from films, which is
yeah,
primarily the reason I think everyone comes to film for
watches.
some
Yeah, you
form
want to
of
feel
emotional
something.
resonance.
Yes.
I derive most of that from the stories at
Yeah.
play and the storytelling and how you tell the story, I guess.
Right. Whereas
Whereas,
I'm more interested in the painting of the themes and like
yeah,
the
how you tell
tapestry
the
that's worked
themes of it.
together of
Yeah.
yeah the kind of the thesis of the film and where they comes from thematically, and I think I don't know. There's been a lot of talk about like how this is Scorsese telling the story of the Osage people and like how kind of complex that is, as far as him as a non-Osage person, obviously as a white person, telling the story and kind of like lending a voice to their perspective, and I don't think the film is necessarily the thesis is purely about him giving a voice to them. Um, and I think that's emphasizing. We're going to get into spoiler territory here, so click off and you can put something on screen. But by the ending, where Scorsese shows up, and we kind of have this like dramatization of the stories of the Osage, and it's all done by white people, and it's done for entertainment. And at the end of that dramatization, Martin Scorsese himself comes into the frame and reads the last, like basically what happened to Molly, and tells the truth that there were no mention of the murders in her obituary. I think it was her obituary, and
Yeah.
like I think that is where the core thesis of the film lies. And I'm actually going to read a bit from a Letterboxd review, and you can put it up on screen. We can give credit to this person. But they said, reckoning with the privilege that you put in that put you in the positions to amplify the voices whose blood stains it, holding up a mirror to yourself and your audience, and making everybody aware of your helpless complacency. This is Martin Scorsese constricted, and I I don't know. That really puts into words I think a lot of my feelings towards this film and what I think Scorsese is really trying to do. I think the constant emphasis on like photography and like how photography is able to like capture the truth of these people throughout. It really feels like it's Scorsese's magnum opus, and he's not only just like he's not merely telling the story of like history in my mind, but he's like kind of like reflecting on his own place in history and like cinema's relationship with storytelling and kind of like the duty that cinema has to tell truth, but how because of everybody has different perspectives growing up, right? You can only act within your own perspective and your own ideas and everything, and I think this film really dives into that and kind of Scorsese reckoning with his own abilities as a filmmaker and his own career as a filmmaker to convey truth through a historical lens.
Yeah.
And
And I get that, and I do get all the arguments, and I do get why that would potentially be considered the main thesis of the film.
yeah,
However, I do think that there isn't one aim to any film or any creative project, and another
I agree.
aim of this film, I think, evidenced through Lily Gladstone's character
Yeah,
and through having such a focus on her in some moments, was to give a voice to this historically marginalized community, and I therefore think that Scorsese is hinting at it almost. And I
mm,
would have so. I there are two films here, and I mentioned this before. I think there is one in which you follow Molly's perspective and you follow the perspective of the people of the Osage nation, and I think that is an incredibly important film to tell. Obviously, there's atrocities were committed against them. We need to see the effects of them from those directly
yeah,
affected. I also think there's a very interesting film following Leonardo DiCaprio's Ernest and exploring how you can sort of become radicalized or become to believe these ideas about racial identities and how William Hale, Robert De Niro's character, can sort of slowly weave his way into Leonardo DiCaprio. Like we follow it exclusively from his perspective, as at the start of the film he's a fairly, well-intentioned guy, slowly drawn, slowly pushed further and further
yeah,
into this world. I think there is a very interesting story to tell there, and in which case you can't have the perspective of the Osage people because the whole point is they are being dehumanized in his mind and he is losing the perspective of them. So I don't know if these two films necessarily come together. And if you are going to tease ideas of giving a voice to the Osage people, I think you need to go further with it. I don't think they can just be in every so often because I think that does less for not achieving its aim of giving a voice to them, but it does more for detracting from the perspective that you're trying to convey with Leonardo DiCaprio's character, and it further de-aligns you with him. You're like, oh no, Leonardo DiCaprio is, what he's doing is incredibly bad, and you lose that sort of subjectivity that is so necessary to aligning with him. Therefore, I don't think you ever necessarily align with either side, either perspective. I don't think you get the time to align with the Osage people, and I don't think you get the time to see their perspective. And I also think that seeing their perspective inherently detracts from what you're getting from Leonardo DiCaprio's character. So I guess that's where I just think
Sure.
as a storytelling fundamental, I get what it's doing potentially with the fact that you are sort of Martin Scorsese is doing his best in a way to
I,
present the
and
perspective.
I
But
understand your point from a
yeah,
screenwriting perspective. I am perfectly fine if some of the screenwriting fundamentals are sacrificed in service of theme. I
yeah,
personally don't have a problem with that because I just, again, I resonate more with theme. So
yeah,
if that's going to be sacrificed, and like, yeah, I do think that maybe if you're just going purely looking at like the storytelling, it would have been better to tell the most compelling story, just to focus on one of them. But again, I think that that almost plays into the perspectives of the themes and kind of like the restraint when, you know, as you said, like teasing the perspective of the Osage. I think that's Scorsese kind of like metatextually like acknowledging the like how different perspectives on history can alter our perception. And I think the point of this was to offer as many perspectives as possible to align with the theme. And I think that like what really brought it together was, even before Scorsese showed up at the end, just the radio dramatization at the end. Um, because you know how much I love metamodernism to begin with, but I think that idea that white people often, rather than lending a voice, are perfectly content to dramatize it from their perspective. We've seen this throughout. I mean, not only with cinema, but with novels and everything. Like because, I mean, of just systematic oppression and racism. Like not even just with Native people, but for a long time and even still now, a lot of the perspectives on racial minorities and minorities in general were done by white people and white men in particular. And I I think with that stage play, like people are often more content and it feels nicer to just dramatize something from their own lens where they don't have to feel bad about it necessarily, rather than actively engaging and listening to other people. And I think that Scorsese in the end is almost making a comment on. This is going to be like the second review in this week that I'm comparing something to Nope. But you already knew where I was going before I even finished that.
yeah,
But with Nope, Jordan Peele is asking the audience the question of why they should care about the spectacle. And I think with this, like Scorsese is asking us how have we engaged with history? Like how have our perspectives altered how we've engaged with history? As there were multiple perspectives in this film, everybody is going to have an inherent bias, an inherent perspective based off of, like I was born in a fairly upper middle class white family. That is going to lend me different experiences where it is going to be near impossible for me to understand other perspectives. I can be empathetic, but I can never actually truly understand that because I've never experienced it. So the best I can do is listen and be empathetic. And I think through art, people have often not done that. And this film feels more like a comment on that and like these atrocities and kind of how people have kind of ignored them and haven't lent a voice to these,
yeah.
rather than trying to tell necessarily just like a compelling story about that time period. It feels more like
Yeah.
a comment on the time period.
Yeah. No, I get that. I just think potentially to review that, I think the fact that he's using so many perspectives actively detract
Sure.
from each perspective you're trying to explore. And when you are deliberately exploring a voice that is historically marginalized,
Yeah.
when you're actively incorporating more perspectives to detract from them, and it just comes across as problematic. I just feel that there is parts of this film that I wanted more from, and I just didn't get that, and I didn't get an entirely satisfying experience because I wanted more from each perspective. As I said, I could have happily seen this film for another, add an extra half an hour, maybe
Sure.
even an extra hour. Sure, that would maybe be pushing the boundaries of
Yeah.
audience accessibility in today's climate. But yes, I would maybe even a mini series. Maybe this could have worked better as a mini series, but fundamentally, I feel even given the 3.5 hour runtime, I think the way that we're teased with certain perspectives, but we don't follow through with them, kind of feels like Scorsese. You say he's commenting, but I don't necessarily know if he, for me, was following through on everything he was trying to do with the
Sure.
film.
Sure.
So yeah, but
And again, I just think that's I'm much happier to again like purely judge a film based off of its thematic work. But like from a purely fundamental screenwriting perspective, I can understand why. I mean, and you aren't the only person to have this problem. I've seen other people voice a lot of similar concerns, but I think in the end, I think what he was going for thematically just really struck me in a way where I could like forgive the sacrifices of it, because like I mean it has to level out. You can't just have like a shit screenplay and then be like but themes at the end.
yeah,
Like I think there has to be like sacrifices. I mean it's I mean the more extreme conversation around this is like like purely experimental films versus just like a tight screenplay, right? And the experimental is going to be pure vibes and themes and tight screenplay. And I think like when you're trying to strike the balance, which is what most films do,
yeah,
is they're somewhere in the middle of playing with the screenplay and also incorporating the themes. I think that you're going to have to sacrifice one for the other, because you can't do everything at once, because that's just impossible through cinematic language sometimes. And I just think it's what level you're willing to accept as far as maybe some faults, I guess, in the screenplay for themes, or some lack of thematic work for the screenplay.
yeah.
And I just
And
think this
again,
this
like
falls within the
yeah,
category for me, and it doesn't for you, and that just purely comes down to
yeah.
how we each personally and subjectively engage with
For sure.
cinema.
And again, a lot of the themes I did really connect with. I thought
Yeah,
they were very complex explorations. There was just something about the film that was holding me back and leaving me
yeah,
a little cold and just sort of me thinking, yeah, this is great. This is like a 10 out of 10 film. There was something holding me back. And I think that is in the fact that we don't follow through necessarily in all the emotional resonance that
yeah,
is necessary for me to connect with a story like this. So
yeah. A-
yeah, it is
And
a
it's
shame, but it is still a great film.
no, it's absolutely excellent, and it's quite interesting because I think in just when we talk regularly, like I'm a far more analytical person, and you're a far more like like a right brain creative person. But when it comes to like how we engage with film from this
It's
perspective, you seem to be
very much
far
your
more
thing.
analytical as far as like the structure of the screenplay, and I really just write off of like feelings and what like the thematic work, like how it made me feel, which
Yeah,
is interesting,
yeah. Whereas
very
I'm
very
like,
interesting.
how is it doing
Yeah,
something to make me
yeah.
feel? Yeah, in a
It's.
certain
I
way.
think. I mean, a lot of this conversation has been more about like how we each perceive films versus the actual film. But I think that that's important, when you're
Yeah,
reviewing stuff, because like there is no way to objectively review a film. Every single like critic, whether they're writing just a random like shit post on Letterboxd, or like writing at like the New York Times, or like have a YouTube channel, whatever, like they're all going to be reviewing stuff based off of their own personal biases. That's just how it works. There's no way to objectively review something. So I think talking about how you're engaging with the film is almost just as important with what you actually were able to extract from the film.
for sure,
Um,
for sure.
so yeah, yeah. I'm giving this a 10.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, perfectly fair. I'd be looking at, I'll probably say an 8, but realistically, it's like looking at an 8.5. I know we don't do point
Yeah,
fives,
yeah,
but like
yeah,
it's closer to a 9 than it is to a 7.
for
It's
sure,
a very high rating, so
for sure, for sure.
and go out and see it in the theater as well.
Yes,
Like
please see this
I
in
know it's
theaters.
3.5 hours, but you're more likely to
It's
be
worth it.
actively engaged for those 3.5 hours if you're sitting in a theater than if
Yeah.
you. I
Don't
think this
watch this
film.
like on your phone or your
Yeah, I
laptop
think it is
or
immeasurably better. Like the
yeah,
difference is exponential in terms of your enjoyment of the film if you go and see it in
absolutely.
a theater. So, like in a way that
Absolutely.
you know not all films need a theatrical experience. I think,
Yeah,
I've
I'm so
registered this
glad that
category
Apple
on
put this
like,
on theaters rather than
but
just like
exactly,
dumping it
this
on
is
streaming. Yeah,
one that you definitely need to.
absolutely, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about awards because obviously awards are the only way that you can engage with the film. Um,
Yeah,
fuck, I'm gonna retake that.
that's fine.
Motherfucker. Okay, here we go. Three, two, one. Okay, so now we're going to talk about awards because obviously awards are the only way that you can engage with a movie.
Indeed.
I feel like we had a good enough conversation that can justify us talking about awards a little bit now,
Yes, yeah, yeah.
because they're fun. Obviously, the more important thing is like how you're engaging with the film, but awards are fun and
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. The question of will he win Best Director? I think that's the most
that's the
important thing
really
to take
important part of
away
it because
from this
that's what
film.
everybody wants to hear.
Yeah,
But no, we can talk about it. There's a lot of love for Martin Scorsese, and I think deservedly so. There's if anybody's gonna be known as this, I've seen Poor Things now. I really don't believe that that is going to be like winning Best Picture, Best Director, or anything like that. If anything, going to be challenging it at this point, I feel like it's like this or like The Holdovers or like there's a weird tiny world where I still think Barbie can, but this could make sense. I mean, it's also really long, and I don't. It also doesn't entirely make you feel the best after it. But the love for Scorsese is insane right now. Like scroll through Twitter, scroll through just any film news thing. Like everybody is singing the praises of Scorsese, and deservedly so. The man is having like one of the best late career runs ever. And like I mean, just speaking as far as like general reception, like Wolf
yeah.
of Wall Street. I didn't entirely love, but like I mean, just going
I
from
know.
like
Yeah,
the
everyone
the
loves it.
like even just like
Yeah,
from the I know I'm like the only one,
yeah.
but like The Departed, from that to like Shutter Island to Hugo to Wolf of Wall Street to
Silence.
Silence, then the Irishman, and now
Irishman. Yeah,
this. I don't love all of those movies. I like some of them quite a bit. Silence I think is probably my favorite of the run aside from Killers of the Flower Moon.
that's a
Um,
take. That is
I
a
know
take.
I am not like one of the I'm not like the other
Yeah,
girls.
yeah.
But no, just as far as general reception, like that's a pretty ridiculous run to be having at the end of your career. Um, so I wouldn't be shocked if Scorsese won director screenplay. And I think director is almost more likely, which will make a very interesting battle between him and Nolan. And I think that whoever wins that could translate to Best Picture. I wouldn't
I
completely
agree.
write this off of
Yeah,
winning Best Picture because just from the reception overall, like this really does feel monumental.
yeah,
Um,
for sure, for
it
sure. I
doesn't.
definitely think the director is a key
Yeah,
battleground, as you say. I think that maybe the problem is with it winning Best Picture is that Oppenheimer is going to be appealing
text.
to the same sorts of fans
Yeah,
and is slightly more accessible and is slightly more mainstream
yeah,
and is potentially slightly more time-wise relevant
yeah.
in terms of what it is exploring. So I think, and in terms of text that will carry over, I think Killers will
Oppenheimer was
slightly
more.
just be the number
Yeah.
two in every tech category, which I think could be a consistent problem throughout the series. It's always going to be playing second fiddle to
But the thing,
Oppenheimer.
like the
So,
Scorsese love is just
but
it's an
exactly,
interesting factor. It's a
yeah, if
really interesting
Scorsese
factor,
love can keep going further, and if Lily Gladstone can potentially launch herself
which I
into
think that she
win
can
contention,
win. Like she's really reserved,
yeah,
but I mean she is
as I said, she steals
earth-shatteringly good.
every scene
I
she's in.
she's like
Yeah,
again, she's like might be my favorite performance of the 2020 so far. Like it's just astonishing work from her.
I mean,
Like
her narrative is insanely good as well in
yeah,
terms of as narratives go. Like it's about as good as you can get.
yeah,
So there's that aspect. I think she's in the film enough. Like, yes,
yeah.
if I was an Academy Award campaigner, I would choose to put her in supporting.
I'd put
But
her in lead, but
equally, she has enough to do to warrant her position in lead.
yeah.
So I don't think that's a major worry. And I also think that the passion just for Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro, sure, I doubt they'll win. I mean, I would love to see Robert De Niro win. I'd say he's
Yeah,
maybe my favorite supporting actor of the year. If between him and Ryan Gosling, which is very, very contrasting
very
forces.
interesting.
But yes, like I would love to see him win, and there'll be a lot of passion there as well. In text, I said there'll be a lot of passion just just
Yeah,
around the body, just around the academy. Like everyone will be wanting
yeah.
to go for this film. My only question is yeah, like will it just
I
be
mean, like,
playing
a
second
screenplay
fiddle?
nominations happening.
Screenplay
Like,
nominations happening. Win, I think that would be weird. Like yeah, it could, but I think that would be a weird
hmm
win. Maybe
yeah,
if it's on its own. If it's winning Best Picture and winning Best Director, sure,
then maybe,
screenplay
yeah,
could come along with it. But on its own, I
yeah.
don't really see that.
And then like as far as text, like It could win cinematography. I'm still leaning towards Oppenheimer, but it could. Editing, again, it could win, still leaning towards Oppenheimer. But, like, nominations there. Production design, I think, will probably happen. Um,
Yeah.
Costumes, I think, will probably happen.
Yeah. Probably.
Um, Sound, I think, will probably happen.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah. Probably makes
I think
sense.
score will probably happen.
Probably.
Like, there's a lot here.
Yeah.
The thing is that I think it will lose all of those to either Oppenheimer or Poor Things or Barbie.
Yeah. Potentially, and this could just be enough to sort of see it out of the race. If it doesn't win a
Irishman.
tech,
Irishman.
yeah, I'd be. I mean, what I really hope for this film is that it doesn't end up as the goose egg, as the early front runner.
I
It
need
gets
Lily to
overpassed.
win.
Like,
Like,
I really hope that something from this film can
even if it's
win, because I
just
think it
Lily,
deserves.
like I,
Yeah, even if it's just even if it's just a tech like this, if this goes home empty-handed
it would be
on awards
disappointing.
night, it would be a disappointment. It would be a disappointment, but I
Yeah.
do think something will come through for it. Will it be Best Picture? I'm not confident, especially since
No.
I wouldn't be going Martin Scorsese right now in director. I can see a world in which that happens, but I would stay. I believe I'd be staying with Nolan on that
Yeah.
regard. But
I
like,
agree, but
he
it's
could.
after seeing the film and after seeing the reception, there's a lot more to be had. Also, one other thing I want to bring up. Do I think this is going to get a nomination in all four categories? Maybe, because Cara Jade Myers, incredible, incredible as Anna. I thought that she was really, really great. I hope that she gets a narrative, pushed for her, by Paramount and Apple,
Yeah.
because really, really phenomenal work. And I'd
And
love for her to
supporting
get
actresses
nominated.
week. Supporting
Supporting
actresses
actors this
week.
week, and there's definitely room for her. If I'm
Yeah.
being honest, I think that she's my number one personally in supporting actress, not for predictions, but just for like personal choice. I was really, really impacted by her work, and I don't know. I think that there's room for her, and it wouldn't be undeserving for this film to get all four. I mean, people have also talked about Jesse Plemons a bit. That talks free service. I don't necessarily think he'll get in unless this film's
Yeah.
like sweeping, winning Best Picture.
Yeah.
But
I don't think he's in it enough. Like, yes, given the films, like he might be in it for 20 minutes, which would be probably more than a lot of
yeah,
other people. But
but
like, I don't.
percentage wise.
Percentage wise,
Like
he
I
doesn't
think
leave
I
enough of an
think like
impact.
you have the main three of Lily, Leo, and De Niro. I think if anybody else was able to sneak in, I think it would be Cara Jade Myers, and that's what I'd
Yeah,
like to see sneak in,
agreed.
just
Agreed.
with the category and just she would deserve it. I think like she's really good.
Sure.
Is there anything else we have to say about this movie?
I don't believe so. I
All
think we've
right.
covered all the awards. Yeah.
Well,
Hopefully, potentially a Best Picture player that we've got on our hands here.
yeah. No, this is gonna be a fun race. This is gonna be a really fun race between Oppenheimer, Killers, Holdovers, Poor Things, and Barbie are still kicking about. It's gonna be a really, really fun race. But
Sure.
those are our thoughts on Killers of the Flower Moon. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. I think we had a pretty good conversation,
Yeah.
maybe just a little bit. But if you'd like to follow us on social media, you can do so. There are also links to support the SX strikes down there. Hopefully they can get those resolved soon, and the actors can get what they so rightly deserved. As Lily Gladstone on the day of Killers of the Flower Moon release was out on the picket line, which is just so incredible. Love her so much. Give her the Oscar. I'm becoming way too passionate about this. This
You're
is
becoming
bad.
sad.
I'm
Yeah.
becoming way too invested.
Let's face it.
But thank you very much for watching. And until next time, we're gonna have more conversations. Stay safe and goodbye.